Yes.
My apologies, but the video is not coming through.
Oh, I don't know. Our tech guy's right here beside me. Shall I continue?
Maybe if you could just check really quickly.
He's checking.
There's an X through the video icon.
Yeah, but that's for different people.
Go ahead and continue, Chancellor.
All right, Anthony?
We can't see you, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and continue. And Brad, if you could check your settings as the host, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, they're working on it. The point I was making is that this global public health crisis is something we've not seen certainly in our lifetimes, and country not for some time. And we know that the environment is dynamic. Things are changing from day to day, in many cases from hour to hour. Policy decisions and the like that were relevant one day may not be relevant the next, but we come here every day to keep our top priority in mind, and that is make sure that our students are safe, that the faculty and staff are safe, and perhaps the question we all ought to start to think a little bit about is what the university might look like in a post-COVID world. And because we anticipate relatively soon, by that I mean that not Easter, but sometime over the summer probably. I want to really thank the faculty for and the staff that supported them for getting the classes converted to online in a really quick time frame. I was stunned and thought to myself, how would I get a class if I were teaching that ready in 4 or 5 days, but never having done it before? It's really a Herculean effort, and the early results are very positive. We know they're not perfect, and there wouldn't be. We've asked a little bit of patience. For those of the staff in particular, thank you for helping get our residential students out. I know it was difficult. Many didn't want to leave. They weren't ready to go. And it was a very difficult task, but by all accounts handled with grace and compassion. There are now under 120 students who remain on campus, and down from over 6,000. A lot of empathy for our students and the broader community, and appreciate you putting them first with your dedication and commitment. I just want to say a couple of words about how we've been thinking about our response. Obviously, our first concern is around public health, and that is top priority. We have tried to keep the students' best interests at heart. Sometimes 19 and 20-year-olds don't always make the best decisions, and we've been trying to make sure that we do our best to take care of them. We believe in transparency. We're trying our best to tell you what we are doing and why. If anything, we want to over-communicate. It's difficult in an environment of incomplete information, but nonetheless, we're trying to communicate with you as often as we can. You'll hear more about this, and I mentioned this a minute ago about a post-COVID world, but we're going to have to start planning for what we will do over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the time intervals are. And just want to put that in the back of your mind, and the provost and CFO may have more to say about that. Let me just say a quick word about fundraising in the short run. We're trying to focus our energy on raising money for students in need. in need of housing, but trying to find ways to keep them enrolled. It's a very challenging time for them. Thank you to the deans for doing the same. We will get back to our normal philanthropic efforts in a very timely way, but right now we want to make sure all of our students are taken care of. Let me end by saying two things, one about searches and then one about our work with the UNC system. With regard to the searches, and by the way, every university in the country is in this spot. I think our basic impulse is to drive forward the best we can. The biggest challenge is getting finalists to campus, and we're working on that and talking to our partners at our search firm. I will say that we are in the later stages of several senior searches. Some we will expect some announcements very soon. People are still interested in us. In the provost search, we've only had 1 of 10 drop out, and that was because of COVID. A family member, an elderly family member, contracted the virus, and the person had to attend to that. Just to get to campus, understandably. And I think we're lucky that folks are still interested in us. Our basic imperative is to keep driving forward the best we can under these circumstances. Finally, we've been working within the system. All of the senior officials have had calls with their respective system counterparts and colleagues around the system. There are many decisions that the system office is making for us, and they are trying to develop an agenda to go to the state legislature and the federal legislature to see about support. I just, in fact, got off a call with President Roper, where there are going to be some new directives issued around staff and faculty work and leave provisions, and it looks like it'll be extended through April. I'll have Jeannie Madoran at some point when you all ask about it, and she's here and she can answer the questions with more detail. But they are sort of starting to tick off some of the questions that are right in front of us. So I'll just end by saying, we understand that the city is going to issue a shelter-in-place or stay-at-home order at 4 o'clock today. As you know, many of the other counties, Wake, Mecklenburg, and several others have issued one. So we'll have something to say about that, about who can come to campus and who ought not to. We're as prepared as we can be, not knowing what we're facing. It's a very difficult organizational challenge, but we have a good team, and I feel confident that we're up to the task. I know you all have a lot of questions, so I'll turn it over to the provost to make some remarks, and then we'll take some questions. Dana?
Good afternoon. I hope everyone is staying healthy and that you're managing as well as possible in this challenging time. UNC Greensboro is a very special community. I've been very heartened by the way that we have come together to support, whether it's staff supporting our students who remain on campus because they have nowhere else to go, whether it's transition to online learning, or whether it's staff work for a colleague whose health status limits their ability to be present on campus. Thank you. You're what makes being here so special. I would like to share just a few quick updates on work underway in the academic community. First, we have been working for almost 2 weeks now to mobilize what we are informally referring to as an academic relief package for our students. I was very pleased to work with the Faculty Senate Academic Policies Committee recently to further this work, and we will soon be ready to make an announcement about any number of forms of relief for students who are challenged in this new educational environment. First, of course, we are encouraging our instructors to be flexible with students, just as we're encouraging our students to be patient with faculty. But we will be streamlining the withdrawal process for students who cannot complete. But I think more importantly, we will the option to withdraw post the issuance of grades. So students will be motivated and encouraged to try to complete the semester and not have their education disrupted. But in the event they cannot, then there will be relief in the form of withdrawal. We'll be extending, I believe, the time period for removal of incompletes. And the one thing that's been top of mind for everyone is a move toward what some call pass-fail grades. We're going to use the terminology satisfactory, unsatisfactory, most likely. And you'll hear much more about these strategies in the very near future. We're hoping as early as Friday, we can make a general announcement, and more detail will follow once we have the procedures worked out. It's important that we also provide for our faculty who are working diligently, as Chancellor Gilliam referred to convert courses into teach courses in some instances in a format that's totally unfamiliar to them. They're working incredibly hard, and as they do so, their scholarly and creative work is likely disrupted for a period of time. We have the University Tenure and Promotion Committee working with others in the research office on some version of a tenure stop clock for all tenure earning faculty. The details are to be worked out. It will probably be an opt-in available to all. Now it's just important that everyone breathe a sigh of relief and know that this will be available and that we will communicate in the coming weeks the details of how to access it. We've also worked with deans to extend, in many instances, the deadlines for submission of annual review materials. And we have suspended student evaluations of teaching for this semester, at least the use of those for evaluation purposes. We will do evaluations in all courses for formative feedback, but that feedback will go only to faculty members to help them evaluate how they can improve on their work. More details to follow, but I think it's very important for you to know that this is unfolding in this time of high stress. Again, thank you all for all you are doing.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Frank. So we'll start with the questions. First question will be asked by Kisha Carmichael, Staff Senate Co-Chair.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Gilliam and Provost Dunn. My question that I have from the list is, how are you all keeping your spirits up during this turbulent time?
Is that a trick question, Keisha?
No.
Dana? Well, I know how Dana is. She's got a companion at her remote site.
It's true. I always look for the bright side, and it is fun to sit at home and Zoom with my dogs in my lap. So that helps a little bit, and some walks around the lake at off hours. And again, what I see around campus is people coming together to help one another. It's very heartening. So there is something positive in even the most challenging times. Chancellor?
I've been a little bit more guitar. I found a little bit more time for that. And I have been binge watching late at night with my daughter and my wife a variety of shows. So I think we're all holding up pretty well, and I'm heartened, and to sort of extend Dana's comments, I'm heartened by the great effort that people are putting out to really rally and try to really make the best go of it we can. So I think we still have a lot of energy here in Mossman. We're all pushing hard and working hard, and we all know it's difficult. And I continue to talk about decision making with incomplete information or under conditions of incomplete information. And so that becomes real tricky. but we're trying our best.
Thank you very much. The next question will be Andrea Hunter, Faculty Senate Associate Chair.
Above the national and state resources, are you being advised by UNC faculty familiar with epidemiology while considering our back to school planning?
Dana, you want to
I'll
take
be
that?
happy to take that one. We've heard from a number of faculty whose expertise is directly related to the issues at hand. Our School of Nursing in particular has been engaged in any number of ways. They produced a video for our students and others about behaviors that are associated with staying healthy. That type of advice is invaluable at a time like this. We've also had input from faculty in public health, and we will continue, as always, to rely on our faculty expertise. I know that there have been community queries into our chemistry and biology departments, I believe, about possible future roles they might play related to testing. So I do see us activating our faculty resources and expect that that will continue as this unfolds.
Thank you.
The next question would be from Adam Horton, Staff Senate Co-Chair.
Hi, Provost and Chancellor. The question that we had that came up quite a bit was just about for the fall and the summer, especially classes and all. I know that's probably still up in the air a bit, but are we planning right now that summer classes are possibly going to happen on campus, or are we planning that they would be online as well?
Well, I'll just say, and Dana can put some meat on the bones, but we're fortunate in that regard that the vast majority of our summer classes are already online. We have done that, 3 or so years ago. So that we think will be an advantage for us. The fall is what we're all, we can't predict. We suspect there will be, if we are back to normal operations, a reduction in enrollment, a further erosion. But we just have to see. I've been following some students meeting chatter, and many of them are finding out after having been away, living at home isn't exactly the thing they want to do. And so we'll see what happens in the fall, but we'll be scenario planning here over the next several weeks. Dana, you want to add to that?
With respect to summer, about 80% of our summer coursework for the last few years has been online. So we're very fortunate in that regard because these are courses that have not been hastily put online, but have been very carefully and thoughtfully designed by faculty. You will be hearing in academic units soon from your deans if you are scheduled to teach a face-to-face course for summer. We're reaching out now to ask if you are able to work between now and the start of summer to get that converted. And we will have some support for you. Instructional designers, both in the academic units and our Division of Online Learning, can provide some assistance. So we're hopeful that we can move that percentage of summer courses that is online much higher. And in the event we are not able to have face-to-face courses, we can still serve our students well.
Thank you very much. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to remind everyone, this is kind of our new normal. So we have 931 participants, and we have had a few challenges, but please make sure that you mute your mic and also turn off your video if you are not speaking. So again, please mute your mic and video if you're not speaking. So the next question is the impact of COVID-19 and the budget. So any thoughts there as far as how that might impact the budget one way or the other?
Charlie Leffler's here. I don't know if you can see him. He's practicing social distancing, but he's been running some numbers. And Charlie, do you want to make some comments?
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor. I think from a standpoint, there's several different ways that this will impact us, of course. First, it's just the cost we're experiencing right now in doing some special things, whether it's additional sanitizing or other costs related to staffing and so forth. And so there's those out-of-pocket costs, and those might continue for a period of time. And we've been looking at both the next 3 and 6 month time frame in trying to coordinate that. The other is that we're going to, we'll have, we fear that we're going to have some additional impact on the enrollment. And that, of course, will have an impact in terms of both tuition receipts as well as the funding model that we rely on in terms of the system and the state. So there are those kind of impact issues that we are going through a process of looking at scenarios to see what might be the magnitude of what might be the impact at different levels of student change, or if we have to continue doing what we're doing for a longer period than I hope we're going to do it. So there's those components. Now, to mitigate that, I would say that there's been a number of conversations with the system office related to, how might we get some assistance for some of these things from the legislature. And so there's conversations going on at that level in terms of how the system-wide cost or the system-wide impacts of this might be mitigated with the help of the legislature. So that conversation is going on. And if you've listened to some of the media, you know that the governor's been contemplating a special session of legislature to talk about some of these issues. And of course, within the framework of issues statewide, this is just one small part of that, acknowledging. But the state is in a good position economically, certainly to help with some of these things. And I know looking at how the federal action that's under consideration right now in Washington impacts this is another moving part. So there's a lot of moving parts. And the bottom line is impacts. The question is, how can we mitigate these impacts with these actions we take locally in terms of how we modify our services and our operational things? And the other is, how much assistance might we get from the state in this situation? So it's still a bit of a moving target. We're gathering based on what we've seen over the last few weeks, trying to project those forward. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Charlie. Yes, very much so. Kisha, go ahead and ask the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, how is it decided on mandatory versus voluntary workers and the requirements to come to campus?
Well, our Director of HR is here, Associate Vice Chancellor Jeannie McGoran. Jeannie?
So mandatory employees, it's determined by the supervisor, and basically those that are required to report to campus would be those that do have to come to campus in order to fulfill a critical role. And that would be to basically keep the operations that need to run on campus running. Today, we had some technical people that were in the room. Those would be considered to be mandatory employees for this purpose because they were needed to put this WebEx on. That may change depending on the needs of the university. That is going to change if there's a stay-at-home order, because with a stay-at-home order, you asked about volunteer employees, people that just want to come to campus because they don't want to work remotely will need to stay at home. They will not be able to come to campus. And only those employees who are considered to be essential to the critical operations of the university to keep it running, and that might be somebody like a steam plant operator or somebody from housekeeping that needs to service the small amount of students that are here. Those would be an example of the type of critical employees that would be considered mandatory to report to campus.
May I add something here, because I've received a number of questions today about this from our faculty research community. There will be a window for researchers who have essential work, maybe cells or something that they must keep alive on campus, to access their laboratories for ongoing research. The Office of Research is preparing a document now with the anticipation of releasing it later today or tomorrow that will provide guidance on this specifically.
And I would just add, the system office is, in order to maintain maximum flexibility, will delegate much of this authority to the campuses and will establish a policy for exceptions. There may be some as Dana said, you can think of people who have animals in a lab that have to be kept alive, or other kinds of activities that aren't sort of basic facilities, groundskeeping and the like activities. So I think over the next few days, there'll be more clarity on what counts as mandatory and what doesn't, and how compensation is going to work. So stay tuned.
Thanks very much. Andrea? Andrea, just make sure your mute button is turned off.
Will there be reimbursements for meal plans and dorm days not used?
Say that, can you say it again? We only heard the last of what you asked.
Will there be reimbursements for meal plans and dorm days not used?
The answer is yes. I'm hedging because we're not allowed to make any announcements right now. But I guess the best thing to say is that the system office has taken this under serious consideration, appears to be close to a decision and an announcement about that. We understand that students and their families are rightfully concerned about refunds of money they paid for dining and housing. And I think that you'll hear very soon what the official policy guideline will be. Charlie, you want to add?
I would only add to that, Chancellor, that I think, I would say from the perspective of UNCG, we do recognize that they are deserving of recognition of not using these full services. And to the Chancellor's point, we're kind of hoping that it'll move in a direction that we can manage it. Of course, we realize also that these refunds come from funds that are used to run the buildings that aren't being occupied. So we still are going to have these costs in some cases, but we'll have to look through that as part of the whole financial impact issue that I spoke about just a moment ago.
Yeah, and the provost made a good point to me earlier today that we're not charging for online learning. And there's been a lot that's gone towards that. So we won't figure that in the calculation, but people ought to understand that these are going to be very complicated decisions, probably made student by student, because people are in different stages of payment plans. They have different bills out there that they get and the like. So all of this will be taken into account, but I think it will happen. The decision on what we're going to do will be announced very soon, matter of days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, go ahead.
Next question is, would we be extending class for an extra week this semester because we missed that week last week of instruction?
We will not need to do so. As you know, in most semesters, we have a little extra contact time built in for snow days or other unforeseen contingencies. So we do have that time available. And then the fact that we are moving to an online format moves us away from the same understanding of contact hours. We've consulted personally with SACS, COC, our accreditor, as has the system office. And what they have stated is that it is critically important that our faculty make sure that they can meet the student learning outcomes associated with their courses. So that, as opposed to contact hours, really needs to be our focus in the remainder of the semester.
Thank you very much.
Is about sanitizing protocol. So is UNCG following appropriate sanitizing protocol?
Mr. Leffler, what are your folks doing in facilities?
Well, the answer is yes, and that's across, of course, the residence life and facilities operations, the dining halls, and so forth. We're following the above and beyond the CDC recommendations at this point, and that's through a combination of change of methods, frequency of cleaning and cleaning materials being utilized. I think that certainly with the population of the campus decreasing, it has changed our routine of that considerably in terms of the frequencies. We're not cleaning places that are not being occupied currently. What we've been trying to do is respond more to specific needs and ramping up where we still have traffic and ramping back where we're not. We, of course, within facilities, while we have a group of mandatory employees, getting people here to do it has been one of the challenges that we faced across the campus. But I think we've been keeping up with the needs at this point quite adequately. I don't think there's any issues there. We have an on-call group that responds to any specific situations that come up, whether it's just a routine cleaning need, or whether it's particularly a virus-related cleaning need. We have different protocols for each of course. So I'm very comfortable with where we're at in terms of how we're monitoring this. Our environmental health and safety folks are helping to advise on this, as well as using the outside consulting. I would add that one of the things that we're wanting to make sure we're doing is that we have people contacting us when they encounter anything that they feel is concerning to them, whether it's just regular cleaning again, or whether it's special virus-related cleaning. And we have contact information on our website, both in the Finance and Administration website, and we have now a special web page constructed that gives a number of very specific contact information for each of the divisions within Finance and Administration. So you can get to that from the Finance and Administration web page. Right at the top, there's a banner, and that's a good source to go for how we're operating at this moment across the division, and we're updating that virtually daily. And anything that you don't find there that you need to know, we certainly want to try to get it added, and we welcome your feedback on that, and there's information about that as well on the site.
Thank you, Charlie. So why don't you ask one more question, and then Adam and Brad will go to the real-time questions after that.
The question that I have is about online accounting and reimbursement with staff members moving to telecommuting. What steps is the university taking to create an online system for accounting services and timesheets?
We're having a little trouble hearing you. You need to get closer to the microphone.
Okay, with the staff members moving to working from home, what steps are the university taking to create an online system for accounting services and timesheets?
Charlie, do you want to answer? Jean, you got to answer that one?
I'm still having a little trouble hearing you. I heard about timesheets. So are you talking about completing the timesheets online, or the working remotely and how to account for that?
Yes, it's the question is just asking what steps are being taken by the university to allow for the accounting services, as well as the turning in of timesheets, since most of us are working from home.
Okay, so the turning of timesheets, we did send some instruction out on how to account for administrative leave on the timesheet. Those can be done electronically, and they can be turned in electronically if that is possible. If it's not possible, we will look at a process to try to arrange for people to be able to indicate what they did work or what they need to be paid for administrative leave. There are people working in payroll, both remotely and on campus, to make sure that payroll runs and that people get paid. That's considered a critical function. So we are addressing that.
Related to the accounting components, I would again refer back to the special web page that we put up, which in the finance subsection of that, it speaks to how we will continue to process payroll-related forms, journal voucher forms, expense issues, and so forth. And in each case, there is a specialized email address to which any questions can be submitted, and all of those addresses are being monitored on a real-time, full-time basis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adam, go ahead.
Yes, we had a couple questions regarding the library and it's still being open for access. Is there any plans of closing off the library to in-person access and just having online access?
Provost?
Yes, indeed. The library closed today at 2 p.m. for face-to-face access and will be operating remotely with a substantial remote access presence that we believe will be adequate to serve our faculty and student needs as instruction is continuing.
Talk about the difference between faculty access, public access.
Well, there will be no physical access for faculty, students, or the public. The access will be remotely, and the materials are accessible in that fashion. The library support staff are there as resources to help navigate those materials.
The library, one of the reasons the library stayed open, I think a little bit longer, was because it had computers. And some of the students who remained on campus needed access. And that was one place they could get it, maybe the only place they could get it on campus. And we've since tried to come up with ways and to provide them with access to the internet, either where they're staying or the like. So that period is sort of past now, it's stabilized. And now, as Dana said, the library is physically closed but remotely available.
Thank you. So let's go to the real-time questions. I'll start with a question about non-tenure track faculty. One of the questions looking at contracts and also health insurance.
I'm sorry, Anthony. Say that again. We've got a sound problem.
No problem. The question is looking at non-tenure track faculty in terms of their contracts, when they might end, given kind of this disruption, as well as health insurance.
Non-tenure track faculty have been encouraged to convert their courses to online instruction, and they are continuing in a manner similar to faculty. So the anticipation is that they'll be able to satisfy this work period of their contract. The future, in terms of the longer term periods, will depend in part on what happens with respect to enrollment at the university. It's one of the reasons that it is.
Well, somebody's got their mic on. Go ahead, Dana.
It's one of the reasons that it's very important that we do everything possible to maintain our level of enrollment. If we are able to do so, then we would not anticipate any substantial disruption for non-tenure track faculty.
Thank you, Dana. Adam, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. Let me see. We've had quite a few questions coming in, so there's a lot to go through here. Let's see. What about for graduate students and maybe their clocks being affected, especially I would think PhD students, as far as being able to complete? Will that be impacted at all by this?
Just as we have been working on a set of academic relief policies aimed primarily at the undergraduate population, the graduate school has been doing similar work, and you can anticipate in the not too distant future some announcements about particulars that apply only to graduate students. We will endeavor to do everything possible to hold them harmless from the impact of this semester or this COVID-19 experience if it extends somewhat longer. So there will be potentially extensions on eligibility for assistantship support for students who have been disrupted.
Thanks, Dana. The next question is looking at a possible delay in annual faculty evaluations. And the other comment was a desire to maybe have these more frequently, given the fact that it's good to hear from you.
I elected to work individually with each of the deans in terms of expressing this desire because the calendars differ across the academic units and the internal processes differ slightly as well. I recently compiled feedback on the actions taken by each dean, and the majority of deans have extended somewhat the deadline, ranging from a week to a few weeks in some instances. Those who have not had already received the majority of the materials, so felt that there was no need for a wholesale extension, but have worked individually with a few cases where the materials had not yet come in. So my sense is that the deans are working very hard to be accommodating, and I would urge anyone who feels that that has not been the case to speak with your dean. We did get some questions about having more frequent review periods, such that if people are not ready to submit the materials in this cycle, we could do a second one in 1 year. Unfortunately, that is, I believe, logistically prohibitive. It's a very complex process, and we are stretched thin and burdened, particularly in this challenging time. And to add a second set of reviews on top of what's already unfolding would strain the system in ways that I think is really not worth the benefits. I think we're much better served by holding people harmless where necessary with respect to things like stopping tenure clocks and extending deadlines to ensure that people have the opportunity to submit materials.
Thanks, Dana. The next question is, many students have limited or no internet access at home. How are we to handle that and still ensure equal access to education?
From the onset of this challenge, we've been working with our IT division, trying to get a sense of how many of our students have access to both equipment and internet access. We found on the equipment front, our students are in a pretty good place. On the internet access front, it's a little more sporadic. We have done a very limited provision of hotspots in some areas for students to help them gain access. But as a wholesale solution, unfortunately, it's cost prohibitive and the availability is also limited, we understand, at this time. If students don't have access and are not remaining on campus, the real option we have in this time of disruption is to be very flexible with them in terms of extending incomplete grades and offering an extended time period for which they can remove these incompletes should they have many of them at a single point in time. It's a challenge. The digital divide is very real. It's a challenge all the state universities are experiencing, and there are no simple solutions.
Thanks, Dana. Adam, do you want
And I would just say we're also meeting with student government representatives to also try to get a sense of how prevalent this problem, how prevalent limited access to the internet is among our undergraduate student body. So far, we have been, I don't know if Dana used the word okay. I think that's, so far we've been okay with not without a non-trivial number of complaints about students not having access, but we do worry about it. I've heard and sort of monitoring from the students' social media that they're going to libraries and coffee shops, and in the more rural areas, the restrictions actually are a little less on people's movement and gathering, just because they're not as densely populated. So we worry about that, and as Dana said, we'll make exceptions for technology hardships.
Thank you. Adam, do you want to take the next question?
Sure. It looks like we've had a couple questions regarding when staff do return to campus. And if that happens to be before, let's say, public schools open back up, would there still be the possibility for staff to work remotely because they are still trying to manage childcare and other things as well?
We're encouraging supervisors to be extremely flexible during this period of time with flexible work scheduling, with allowing people to work remotely. We really don't know what is going to happen in terms of the school and how that might coordinate with us being able to return to work. So it's hard to answer that question right now, but I will say that we will continue to try to do the best that we can to enable people to either continue working, use their available leave time if administrative leave becomes unavailable at some point, or again, just be as flexible as we can to try to minimize the impact that this is having on people and their families.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, if a member of the UNC community becomes positive for COVID-19, what is required of us in regards to reporting?
Interesting question. It's one that we've taken up with the system office. First of all, the local public health authority is the only authority that can report. But once that's done, the question becomes, then what responsibility does the university have to communicate? So far, individual campuses have been communicating with their constituencies when they've had a positive test in their student or student on campus or a person on campus. It is my understanding that the system office may change that policy, but we've not heard anything final on that. In other words, all cases we aggregate up to the system office and then people could find it that way. As it stands now, it's the local health authority and then up to the individual institutions to make whatever announcement they deem appropriate. Did you have any?
No, I think you covered it. And you know, we've tried very much to be communicating all the information that we get and organizing it. And so I think, you know, our position is going to be as transparent as possible.
And as I said at the beginning, during this, I'd rather be accused of over communicating than under communicating. I think the updates coming from the campus have been regular and detailed, and we'll continue to do that until they tell us to operate in a different manner.
Thank you. Adam?
Okay, let's see. Just trying to look through all of these questions because they've come in fast and furious. So thank you everyone for continuing to submit these questions. I think there was a question regarding HR non-essential functions ceasing in the email that went out today. So faculty members essential to the university operations, recruitment of other faculty, obviously recruitment of students as well for those who work in student affairs or university functions, critical to student success and well-being. How can we take that statement to feel valued and important to the university's mission?
I don't think that's quite the message that's been out there. As far as, and we're all looking quizzically at each other because I don't think that's consistent with any information we have. I think the bigger question will be post-COVID, how do we assess where we stand vis-a-vis personnel and what decisions are going to need to be made about people's status. I think that's the fairest thing we can say.
There was a message that went out about some human resources activities that referred to hiring people and some reallocations and changes to job descriptions and things of that nature. But that communication didn't address students at all.
On the faculty side, we understand that the discretion has been delegated to the campus to decide if we go forward or not. And I think the provost has sort of outlined a very clear path of what searches and so on will continue. And we're at the executive level as well, where we're going forward with our searches.
Yes, we are continuing with faculty searches. They're considered things that we can exempt from this very temporary freeze.
Contrary to public belief, the faculty are essential employees at the university.
you. Next question is, can you speak to the role of leadership in our UNC Greensboro community at this critical time? What do you feel are the core values of leadership for you in this at this moment?
Well, I've said, one, we need to make the safety of our campus community a priority, the priority, make sure students, faculty, and staff are safe and healthy. Secondly, that we intend to be as transparent as we can with decision making. And third, we believe in over communicating versus under communicating. I think in general, if we follow those principles, and I've been meeting with groups of presidents and chancellors around the country in various ways here over the last few days, and they've done an interesting number of things to kind of convey to the campus that we'll get through this. Some in videos, but at some point people get tired of listening to the chancellor. We've got some other social media things that we'll try to do to encourage folks to stay positive. But for me, at least, I have a longer view, and I hew to this concept of this too shall pass, as it will. And then the question will be, what are we going to do? There are so many implications and consequences. We have no idea. What's this? You don't know what you don't know. We have no clue as to what's going to happen. I think the other thing that we're going to need to be is flexible. Jeannie, you just mentioned it, and these aren't normal times, and therefore our responses can't be normal. And people are going to have to understand that we may have to change things up. We may have to think a little bit differently. In the macro scheme, there's a lot of discussion. I passed around an article, I don't know, last week about the top 10 macro thinkers in the country and what they thought would happen post-COVID. And there's some really interesting stuff. Some people said you're going to find online learning to be the tipping point to get the faculty to believe. The other side said that community now has been shown to be so critically important, and that university communities play a special role. And none of them are Nostradamus, and we'll see, I think, here over the next 3 to 6 months where we're headed. I'm eyes wide open, I guess, is my first principle, because we don't know what's coming at us.
Any thoughts or comments about that?
I would say that it's become very apparent to me in a challenging time such as this that there is a vast array of expertise in the university community, and individuals from very different vantage points have much to contribute to our navigating this challenging time. So it's really important to listen and to defer to those who have expertise and understanding. For example, we have an outstanding emergency management office here on this campus. We are very privileged in that regard. And so I think a really important takeaway from this, I'm not sure it's a leadership perspective, is that leading sometimes is following, and we must rely on the expertise of those who possess it.
I want to lift up Dana's point about our emergency management team. We've all really deferred to their expertise. They've done a wonderful job with being disciplined in their thinking about how we approach this. We rely heavily on them, both from a strategic and a tactical point of view. So we're fortunate, and we don't think the few of us sitting around this table that we have all the answers, nor do we need to control every action at the university. We've, I think, all learned a great deal from our emergency management folks, and so I think I think you're right, Dana. Sometimes you have to follow the lead.
Great. Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time. What I'd like to do is ask for maybe some concluding remarks. We are nearing the end of our time, and I know Chancellor Gilliam and the Provost have so much to do. Would you like to have any concluding remarks?
I'll conclude by once again thanking everyone for the hard work, and we have a lengthy path ahead. I do ask for patience from members of the university community. We will work as diligently as we can to provide the support and the information needed, but we can't always do it quite as quickly as would be ideal. So again, thank you for your hard work and your commitment to what we do, and be safe.
First, again, our thanks to the faculty and staff senates for hosting this online forum. We're sitting here, we don't quite know how this is going over as you sit wherever you are looking at it on your device. But I've been particularly heartened by the number of people who come online to watch us now. It could be that people are getting stir crazy at home and that they're desperately looking for something, so they're watching us. But it could also be that this maybe is a way we can share information with the campus community. And at least you get to hear directly from us how we're thinking. I've been in the face-to-face forums, the turnout has been probably a tenth of what it is today, something like that. So I think we've had greater dissemination in this format, and I'm certainly open to doing it. We'll get the technology bugs worked out as we go here. But so I want to thank the Senates for setting this up. I just really appreciate all the work that all of you out there are doing, and your dedication and your commitment. You all have stood up in a time where we need stand-up people. It's not easy. It's not easy on any of us. You've got lives, you've got kids, you've got parents, you've got to deal with the uncertainty. You have spouses and partners who are facing uncertainty with their employment. This is really, really tough sledding. And it's tough in large part because the so-called enemy is invisible. And you don't know what you're up against. You can't see it. You don't see a hurricane coming or the troops coming or whatever it is. And so it creates a great deal of uncertainty and angst. Stay with us, stay calm. We'll get through this. We'll come out on the other side dinged up a little bit. There'll be some frustration on all of our accounts, on yours and on ours. There'll be some bumps in the road. Ultimately, we'll be a little stronger. Faith in one another that we can accomplish great things. And I too just want everybody to make good decisions to keep you and your loved ones safe. It's just not worth it to risk it. And it's, I know, not great fun to be cooped up for several weeks, but I think as far as we can tell, science tells us that's the best way. So thank you, Anthony. Thank you for your leadership, and everybody have a good evening.
Real fast, concluding remarks. We are recording this session, so it will be posted both in Faculty Senate and Staff Senate websites. And there also has been a question about maybe FAQ, because we have about 35 or so questions that we did not have a chance to get to. So what I'll do is I will work with Dana and Frank to see if we could field some FAQs. And if we are able to do that, we'll be sure to post those on our websites as well. So thank you again for taking your time to be with us today. And as Frank and Dana said, stay safe and be well.
I'm making a request to senators to stay online for a few minutes.
Sure, Tom, I'd be happy to. Let's let everybody vacate and let's have Brad turn off the recording. Definitely. Everyone, faculty senators asked that we debrief really quickly as a faculty senate. So if you are not a member of the faculty senate, you're welcome to listen to our engaging conversation, but we will resume that conversation in just a second. And turn off the recording. Go ahead and begin that conversation.